I've been photographing Bigfoot families for 34 years, and I've never published a single image. Not because I don't have proof. I have thousands of photos, crystal clear, undeniable evidence that would change everything we know about these creatures. I didn't publish them because every time I photographed a Bigfoot, within 7 days, that family would vanish. And after the third family disappeared, I realized something horrifying. My camera was marking them for death. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 71 years old. I'm dying of pancreatic cancer, and this is the story I was told never to tell. The year was 1989, and Daniel Mercer was a man chasing ghosts with a camera. At 37 years old, he'd already built a respectable career as a wildlife photographer. His work had appeared in National Geographic, Audubon magazine, and Nature Conservancy publications. He'd photographed grizzly bears in Alaska, mountain gorillas in Rwanda, snow leopards in the Himalayas. Daniel had a gift for patience, for reading animal behavior, for being in the right place at the precise moment when nature revealed its secrets. But success hadn't brought him satisfaction. Every assignment felt like a repetition. Another bear catching salmon, another big cat stalking prey. Beautiful images, certainly, but predictable. Daniel wanted something more. He wanted to capture something nobody else had ever documented. He wanted to photograph a legend. The Pacific Northwest had always called to him. Daniel had grown up in Seattle, spent his childhood hiking the Cascade Mountains with his father. Those forests felt like home in a way that no exotic location ever could. And the Pacific Northwest held one particular mystery that had fascinated him since he was a boy: Bigfoot. Most of his colleagues laughed when he mentioned it. Cryptozoology was considered a pseudoscience, the domain of conspiracy theorists and attention seekers. The famous Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967 was widely dismissed as a hoax, despite never being definitively debunked. Serious wildlife photographers didn't waste their time chasing Sasquatch. But Daniel had done his research. He'd studied the thousands of reported sightings, the footprint casts, the audio recordings. He'd interviewed witnesses, including several whose credibility he couldn't dismiss. Forest rangers, experienced hunters, indigenous elders. The more he investigated, the more convinced he became that something was out there. In March of 1989, Daniel made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He turned down a lucrative assignment photographing pandas in China and instead purchased 40 acres of forest land in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest in southern Washington state. The property was remote, accessible only by a rough logging road, surrounded by hundreds of thousands of acres of wilderness. If Bigfoot existed anywhere, it would be here. Daniel built a small cabin on the property. Nothing fancy, just a single room with a wood stove, a sleeping loft, and a dark room for developing film. He installed solar panels for electricity and dug a well for water. This would be his base of operations for what he expected to be a multi-year project. His wife, Catherine, thought he'd lost his mind. "You're throwing away your career to chase a myth," she'd said during their last argument before he left their home in Seattle. "We have a mortgage, Daniel. We have responsibilities." "I'm following my instinct," he'd replied. "This could be the most important wildlife documentation of the century. Or it could be nothing. And then what? We lose everything?" Catherine had given him an ultimatum. Give up this obsession or give up their marriage. Daniel chose the forest. He spent the first 6 weeks of his residency simply observing. He set up motion-activated cameras throughout the property, placed in trees and camouflaged carefully. He hiked every trail within a 10-mile radius, memorizing the terrain, noting animal paths, water sources, and potential shelter locations. He studied weather patterns, recorded audio at different times of day, and collected any unusual physical evidence, hair samples, scat, footprints. The locals in the nearest town, a small logging community called Trout Lake, regarded him with a mixture of amusement and suspicion. The owner of the general store, a weathered man named Frank Dietrich, had been particularly blunt. "You're not the first fool to come out here looking for Sasquatch," Frank had said while ringing up Daniel's supplies. "And you won't be the last, but I'll tell you what I've told all the others. If there's something in these woods, it doesn't want to be found. You're wasting your time." "Maybe," Daniel had replied, "but I have to know for certain." Frank had studied him for a long moment. "You got that look in your eye, the look of a man who's already decided regardless of evidence. That kind of certainty can be dangerous out here." Daniel had dismissed the warning. He wasn't some amateur Bigfoot hunter looking for fame. He was a professional wildlife photographer with 2 decades of field experience. He knew how to track animals, how to remain undetected, how to wait for the perfect shot. If Bigfoot was real, he would find it. The breakthrough came on June 3, 1989. Daniel had been checking his motion-activated cameras, a routine he performed every 3 days. Most of the footage showed the expected wildlife: deer, elk, black bears, the occasional cougar. But camera number 7, positioned near a creek about 2 miles from his cabin, had captured something different. The footage was brief, just 47 seconds, but it was undeniable. A figure, massive and bipedal, walked through the frame at dawn. It moved with a fluid gait, its arms swinging naturally, its posture upright. The creature was covered in dark brown hair and stood at least 7.5 feet tall. It stopped at the creek, knelt down, and drank directly from the water. Then it looked up, almost directly at the camera before continuing into the forest. Daniel watched the footage 20 times that first day. He analyzed every frame, measured proportions, studied the movement patterns. This was no bear standing on its hind legs. This was no man in a suit. The muscle structure visible beneath the hair, the length of the arms, the size of the hands, everything indicated this was exactly what it appeared to be. He had his proof. Bigfoot was real. But proof on motion-activated video wasn't enough. Daniel wanted more. He wanted high-resolution photographs in perfect lighting. He wanted documentation that would be impossible to dismiss or debunk. He wanted images that would force the scientific community to acknowledge what they'd been denying for decades. For the next 2 weeks, Daniel devoted himself to tracking the creature. He studied the footage obsessively, noting the direction it had been traveling, the time of day, its behavior at the creek. He set up a blind near the location, camouflaged with branches and moss, large enough to accommodate himself and his camera equipment for extended periods. His patience was rewarded on June 18, 1989, at 6:47 in the morning. Daniel had been in position since 4 a.m., his Nikon F3 with a 300mm lens ready, loaded with high-speed film perfect for the low light of dawn. The forest was waking up around him, birds singing, squirrels chattering, the distant sound of elk bugling. Then he heard it, a sound unlike anything his years in the wilderness had prepared him for. A low, resonant vocalization that seemed to vibrate through the trees themselves. Not threatening, not aggressive, but clearly communicative. It was followed by another sound, higher pitched, almost melodic. They were talking to each other. Daniel's heart hammered in his chest as he slowly raised his camera. Through the viewfinder, he saw them emerge from the tree line. 2 massive figures, one slightly larger than the other, covered in reddish-brown hair. The larger one, he assumed female based on body structure, walked upright with a fluid, confident gait. The smaller one followed close behind. Then Daniel saw the third figure, a juvenile no more than 4 feet tall, walking between the 2 adults. A family. He began shooting, the motor drive of his camera advancing the film frame by frame. Click, click, click. The sound was muted by the blind, but Daniel still held his breath with each shot, terrified they would hear and flee. But they didn't flee. Instead, the family approached the creek. The adults positioned themselves on either side, while the juvenile drank from the water. The larger adult kept watch, scanning the forest with obvious alertness. The smaller adult knelt beside the juvenile, one massive hand gently touching its back, a gesture of protection, of affection, a gesture unmistakably parental. Daniel captured it all, the way morning light filtered through the trees and illuminated their hair, the intelligence in their eyes, the careful coordination of their movements, the clear emotional bonds between them. In 20 minutes of shooting, he exposed 6 rolls of film, 216 frames of the most extraordinary wildlife photography ever captured. When the family finally moved on, continuing upstream along the creek, Daniel remained in his blind for another hour. His hands were shaking. Tears ran down his face. He'd done it. He'd documented something that would change everything. He spent that entire night in his darkroom developing the film with meticulous care. As each image emerged in the chemical bath, his excitement grew. The photographs were perfect, sharp focus, ideal exposure, composition that would make any editor weep with joy. These weren't grainy, distant shots like the Patterson-Gimlin film. These were publication-quality images that showed every detail: the texture of their hair, the structure of their hands, the expressions on their faces. Daniel had already begun planning his announcement. He would contact National Geographic first, offer them exclusive rights to the images. He'd need to write a detailed account of his methodology, his research process, the technical specifications of the equipment used. He'd probably need to lead a team of scientists back to the location to gather additional evidence. This would be the biggest story in natural history. It would vindicate everyone who'd ever believed these creatures existed. It would prove that there were still mysteries in the modern world, still discoveries to be made. His name would be remembered forever. But first, he wanted more photographs. One family wasn't enough. He needed to document multiple groups, show that this wasn't an isolated occurrence. He needed to establish that there was a viable population of these creatures in the Pacific Northwest. For the next week, Daniel returned to his blind every morning. He saw the family twice more, captured another 4 rolls of film. Each encounter reinforced his initial assessment. These were intelligent, social beings with complex behaviors and emotional lives. They weren't monsters. They weren't primitive. They were people in every way that mattered, just not human people. On June 25th, Daniel decided to check the location in the afternoon, hoping to document their daytime behavior. He approached his blind and immediately sensed something was wrong. The forest felt different, emptier, quieter. No birds singing, no small animals rustling in the underbrush. He set up his equipment and waited. Hours passed. Nothing appeared. He returned the next day, and the next, and the next. An entire week went by without a single sighting. The family had vanished. Daniel told himself they'd simply moved to a different area. Bigfoot were known to be nomadic, or so the theories suggested. He expanded his search radius, checked all his motion-activated cameras, hiked trails he hadn't explored yet. Nothing. 2 weeks after the family disappeared, Daniel's camera number 12, positioned near a berry patch 5 miles north of his original sighting, captured footage of a different group. This one consisted of 4 individuals, 2 large adults and 2 juveniles of different sizes. Daniel's excitement returned. This proved it wasn't just one family, there was a population. He just needed to be patient. He spent another week tracking this new group, studying their patterns, finding the ideal location for photography. On July 19, 1989, he got his shot. Another perfect morning, another perfect set of circumstances. He captured 5 rolls of film documenting this family's foraging behavior. The photographs were spectacular. One image in particular would become burned into Daniel's memory forever. the smallest juvenile reaching up to hold an adult's hand while walking through a meadow, sunlight streaming through the trees behind them. It was a moment of such pure tenderness that it transcended species. But 8 days later, this family also disappeared. At first, Daniel still attributed it to normal nomadic behavior, but then a thought occurred to him, a thought so disturbing he tried to dismiss it immediately. Both families had disappeared within days of being photographed. No, it was coincidence. It had to be. Daniel found his third family in early August. This group was smaller, just 2 adults. He observed them for several days before attempting photography. On August 12th, he captured 3 rolls documenting their behavior near a cave system. 6 days later, they were gone. By this point, Daniel couldn't ignore the pattern. 3 families, 3 photography sessions, 3 disappearances within a week of being documented. The probability of this being coincidence was astronomical. He sat in his cabin that night, his photographs spread across every available surface. Dozens of perfect images, undeniable proof of Bigfoot's existence, proof that would make him famous, proof that had cost 3 families their homes, possibly their lives. What had he done? Daniel spent the next week in a state of paralyzed indecision. Every instinct as a photographer, as a documentarian, told him to publish the images. This was what he'd dedicated himself to achieving. This was the discovery of the century. But another part of him, a part he'd been suppressing since Catherine left, whispered that he'd already sacrificed too much for this obsession. His marriage, his previous career, his financial security, and now possibly the safety of innocent beings who'd done nothing but exist in their ancestral territory. He couldn't publish, not yet, not until he understood what was happening. In September 1989, Daniel did something that would define the next 3 decades of his life. He put all his photographs in sealed containers and hid them in a storage facility in Portland, 3 hours away from his cabin. He kept only one image with him, the photograph of the juvenile holding the adult's hand, as a reminder of what was at stake. Then he continued his work, but with a different purpose. He wasn't trying to prove Bigfoot existed anymore. He was trying to understand why photographing them made them disappear. The years that followed became a blur of obsessive documentation and growing horror. Daniel established a strict methodology. When he discovered a new Bigfoot family or group, he would observe them extensively without attempting photography, sometimes for months. He'd study their territory, their habits, their social structures. He'd use binoculars and spotting scopes, maintaining a respectful distance. During this observation phase, the families remained stable, continuing their normal activities in their usual ranges. Only after this extended observation period would Daniel attempt photography, and every single time, within 7 to 10 days of a photo session, the group would vanish completely. By 1995, he'd documented this pattern with 11 different family groups, 11 sets of photographs, 11 disappearances. The correlation was undeniable, but what mechanism could possibly explain it? Daniel wasn't dealing with normal wildlife behavior. Something about the act of photography itself was triggering these disappearances. He explored every possibility he could think of. Was the sound of his camera shutter spooking them? No, he'd used silent electronic cameras with the same result. Was it his human scent? No. He'd observed families for months without incident, only to have them vanish after photography. Was it seasonal migration patterns? No, the disappearances happened in every season, at different times of year, across different locations. The breakthrough in understanding came in 1998, and it came from an unlikely source. Daniel had continued to visit Trout Lake occasionally for supplies, despite the locals' continued skepticism about his work. Over the years, he'd developed a cordial relationship with Frank Dietrich, the general store owner. Frank had never pried into Daniel's activities, seemingly content to let the strange photographer do whatever he was doing in the woods. But one afternoon in October 1998, as Daniel was purchasing batteries and film, Frank spoke up. "You ever talk to the Cowlitz elders?" Frank asked casually. Daniel looked up, surprised. "The Cowlitz tribe? They have reservation land about 40 miles south of here. Their people have been in these mountains longer than any of us. If you're really serious about understanding what's out in those woods, they might have insights your fancy cameras can't provide." It had never occurred to Daniel to seek out indigenous knowledge. He was a scientist, trained in empirical observation and documentation, but he was also desperate for answers. The guilt of causing family after family to disappear was eating him alive. 2 days later, Daniel drove to the Cowlitz reservation and asked to speak with someone knowledgeable about the forests and their inhabitants. He was directed to Margaret Yellowtail, a woman in her 70s who served as one of the tribe's cultural educators. Margaret welcomed him into her home with careful courtesy. She served tea and listened as Daniel explained his work, carefully omitting the specific details about photography and disappearances. He simply said he was studying the large human-like beings that lived in the deep forests. When he finished, Margaret was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "The Siatko," she said. "That's what our people call them. It means people of the deep forest. They've been here as long as we have. Longer, maybe." "Have you ever seen them?" Daniel asked. "When I was a girl, yes. They came near our villages sometimes, especially in winter when food was scarce. My grandmother taught me that we're supposed to leave offerings for them, dried salmon, berries, tools sometimes, and in return, they would leave us alone." "Your people have known about them all this time?" Margaret smiled slightly. "Known about them? Young man, we've lived alongside them for thousands of years. It's you newcomers who think they're a mystery." Daniel leaned forward. "Do you know why they're so secretive? Why they hide from most people?" Margaret's expression grew serious. "Because your people hunt them, not all of you, but enough. When the first white settlers came to these lands, they saw the Siatko as monsters, as threats. They organized hunts. They killed them. The Siatko learned to hide, to avoid all humans except those they could trust." Daniel felt a chill run through him. "Has anyone ever captured one? Taken one alive?" "There are stories," Margaret said carefully. "Dark stories that the elders don't like to repeat, about Siatko who were caught and taken away, about people from the government who came with trucks and cages, about families of Siatko who went into the mountains and never came back." "When did this happen?" "Different times. The last big incident I heard about was in the 1970s when I was younger. Logging companies were expanding into new territories, and some of them found evidence of the Siatko. Footprints, hair, that sort of thing. Government people came through asking questions, telling everyone to report any sightings immediately. Then one day, they loaded something onto a truck covered with tarps and left. The logging crews were told never to speak about what they'd seen." Daniel's mind was racing. These government people, did they use any special equipment, anything to track or locate the Siatko? Margaret studied him carefully. "Why do you ask?" He took a breath and decided to trust her. He told her about the photographs, about the pattern of disappearances, about his growing certainty that his camera was somehow marking these families for capture or worse. When he finished, Margaret was silent for a very long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with sadness. "Our elders have a teaching about the Siatko. They say the forest people can be seen by those with pure intentions, but they cannot be captured by those who seek to prove or possess. The moment you try to possess their image, to claim them as your discovery, you mark them. You make them visible to those who hunt them. "But I'm just taking photographs," Daniel protested. "I'm not." "What is a photograph but an attempt to possess?" Margaret interrupted gently. "You take their image, you capture it, you make it yours, and in doing so, you make them visible to forces that should never see them." "What forces? The government?" "Maybe, or maybe something else. Something that watches for signs of the Siatko being revealed, being documented. Something that removes them before they can be proven to exist." Daniel felt his world tilting. "Are you saying there's an organized effort to keep Bigfoot secret? That someone is monitoring for evidence and eliminating it?" "I'm saying that in the years since white people came to this land, dozens of Siatko families have disappeared after being seen, documented, or captured. I'm saying that your photographs might be triggering something, a response from people who want these beings to remain undiscovered. Or perhaps the Siatko themselves have learned that being photographed brings danger, and they flee to protect themselves." Daniel drove back to his cabin in a daze. For 9 years, he'd been focused on the mystery of Bigfoot's existence. Now he was facing a different mystery. Why did proving their existence cause them to disappear? He spent the next several weeks researching everything he could find about government interest in Bigfoot. It wasn't easy. Most of the information was from questionable sources, conspiracy theorists, and fringe websites. But patterns emerged. Multiple reports of federal agents showing up after major sightings, confiscating evidence, threatening witnesses. Stories of clear photographs or video footage mysteriously disappearing from news archives. Accounts of scientists who'd tried to publish papers on Bigfoot evidence having their research seized or discredited. One researcher, a biologist named Dr. Richard Greenway, had published a paper in 1979 analyzing hair samples that didn't match any known species. Within weeks, his university lab had been raided, his samples confiscated, and his tenure revoked for ethical violations. He'd spent the rest of his career trying to rebuild his reputation, never again mentioning Bigfoot. The message was clear. The government, or some faction within it, was actively suppressing evidence of Bigfoot's existence, and they were doing it efficiently, ruthlessly, and with impressive reach. But how were they monitoring for new evidence? How did they know when Daniel took photographs in the middle of nowhere? The answer came to him slowly, terrifyingly. He thought about all the equipment he'd purchased over the years. Professional camera equipment, film, developing chemicals, batteries, specialized lenses. He'd bought it from camera stores in Seattle, Portland, even some mail order from national retailers. What if someone was monitoring purchases of high-end wildlife photography equipment in the Pacific Northwest? What if his buying patterns had flagged him as a potential Bigfoot researcher? What if his property was being surveilled? Daniel began checking his cabin for surveillance devices. He found nothing, but that didn't mean they weren't there. Modern surveillance technology could be remarkably small, remarkably subtle. He started checking his motion-activated cameras more carefully. Some of them, he discovered, had been moved slightly, not enough to be obvious, but enough that he noticed once he started looking. Someone was coming onto his property when he wasn't there, examining his equipment, possibly copying the footage. The paranoia grew. Daniel stopped visiting Trout Lake regularly, started ordering supplies through a delivery service. He began using cash for all purchases, avoiding anything that created a paper trail. He installed locks on his darkroom and kept his backup photographs hidden in multiple locations. And he made a decision. He would continue documenting Bigfoot families, but he would never, ever attempt to publish or share the photographs. The evidence would stay hidden. The beings would stay protected. For the next 2 decades, this became Daniel's life, a secret project that consumed everything. He'd observe a family, sometimes for years, He'd learned their patterns, their personalities, their relationships. And when he finally couldn't resist any longer, when the photographer in him couldn't bear not capturing what he was seeing, he'd set up his camera and shoot one session, just one, knowing it would cause them to disappear, hating himself for it, but unable to stop. He documented 43 families between 1989 and 2019, 43 sessions of photography, 43 disappearances. Each one felt like a small murder. The photographs accumulated in storage facilities across 3 states. Thousands of images organized meticulously by date, location, and family group. A complete documentation of a species that the world didn't believe existed. Evidence that would revolutionize biological science, anthropology, our understanding of primate evolution and intelligence. Evidence that Daniel could never share, because sharing it meant condemning more families to disappearance. By 2010, Daniel Mercer was 58 years old and completely alone. Catherine had remarried in 1995 to a dentist in Tacoma. She'd sent Daniel the announcement, perhaps as closure. He'd sent back a gift and his sincere wishes for her happiness. They hadn't spoken since. He had no children, no close friends. His parents had died in 2003 within months of each other. His sister called him occasionally, concerned about his isolation, but their conversations were awkward and brief. How could he explain his life to someone who'd think he was insane? The cabin had become his entire world. He'd made improvements over the years, added a better solar panel system, installed a water heater, built a proper workshop for equipment maintenance. But it was still fundamentally a place designed for solitude, for someone who'd chosen to step away from human society. The Bigfoot families had become his family. He knew them better than he'd known most humans. He could identify individuals by their facial features, their gait, the sound of their vocalizations. He'd watched juveniles grow into adults. He'd observed the complex dynamics of their social structures, the careful hierarchies, the clear communication, the obvious affection between bonded pairs. He'd named them privately. The first family had been the River family because he'd found them near a creek. The second had been the Berry family. Over the years, he'd documented the Cliff family, the Morning family, the Singer family, who vocalized more than any others, the Gray family, an older group with silver-tinted hair. Each time he photographed a family, he would spend the following weeks in a state of grief, knowing they were gone. Sometimes he'd return to their territory months later and find signs of new occupation, different footprints, different vocalization patterns. Bigfoot from other regions moving into the abandoned territory. The territories themselves became sites of pilgrimage for him. He'd marked them all on detailed maps, created extensive notes about each family's range, habits, and characteristics. If he died, he wanted this information to survive, even if the photographs never could be shared. In 2015, something happened that shook Daniel's already fragile world. He'd been observing the Twilight family, a group of 5 that lived in a particularly remote area about 15 miles from his cabin. He'd watched them for 2 years without photographing, the longest he'd ever resisted. But on an evening in late May, the light had been so perfect, the scene so breathtaking, the entire family silhouetted against a sunset, playing in a meadow, that he couldn't stop himself. He took the photographs, just one roll, 24 exposures of the most beautiful images he'd ever captured. 7 days later, Daniel returned to the meadow and found something he'd never seen before: blood. Not a lot, but enough. Dark stains on the grass and rocks, signs of a struggle, broken branches, disturbed earth, deep gouges in tree bark, and footprints, human footprints, several sets, wearing boots. They'd been taken, not just driven away, actually captured. For the first time in 26 years of this pattern, Daniel had direct evidence of what happened after a family disappeared. He fell to his knees in that meadow and sobbed. The guilt he'd been carrying for decades crystallized into something sharper, something more devastating. He wasn't just marking families for relocation, he was marking them for capture, possibly for death. He hiked back to his cabin in a daze. When he arrived, he found his property had been visited. Nothing was disturbed, obviously, but small signs were evident to someone who knew every inch of his space. His darkroom had been entered. The door lock showed fresh scratches. His motion cameras had been tampered with. 2 of them were missing entirely. They were watching him. They'd probably been watching him for years, and they'd sent him a message. They knew what he was doing, and they could reach him anytime they wanted. That night, Daniel seriously considered destroying all his photographs, burning them, eliminating the evidence that had cost so many beings their freedom or lives. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. These photographs were the only proof these families had existed. If he destroyed them, it would be like erasing the Bigfoot from history completely. At least while the photographs survived, there was a record. Someday, maybe when it was safe, maybe when the people hunting these beings were gone, the truth could be revealed. He made a different decision. He began creating multiple backup sets of every photograph, storing them in different locations under different names. He wrote detailed documentation about each family, each disappearance, the timeline and pattern he'd discovered. He made copies of everything and sent them to lawyers with instructions. If he died unexpectedly, the sealed packages were to be delivered to specific journalists and researchers. It was a dead man's switch. If they killed him, the information would go public. Whether this actually provided any protection, Daniel didn't know. But it made him feel slightly less powerless. The years continued. More families observed. More families photographed. More families disappeared. The number grew: 35, 36, 37, 38. Daniel was 67 years old in 2019 when he started feeling sick. He ignored it at first. Fatigue, occasional nausea, weight loss. He was getting old. Bodies deteriorated. But when the pain started, persistent and growing, he finally drove to Portland and saw a doctor. The diagnosis came back quickly. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3, maybe stage 4. The oncologist recommended immediate treatment, surgery, chemotherapy, radiation. Even with aggressive intervention, the prognosis was poor. 5-year survival rate, less than 10%. Daniel declined treatment. He'd spent 30 years in isolation, dedicated to protecting beings that most people didn't believe existed. He'd sacrificed everything: marriage, career, normal human connection, for this obsession. He wasn't going to spend his final months in hospitals, being poisoned by chemotherapy, waiting for an inevitable death. He would die on his own terms, in his cabin, in the forest he'd loved for so long. But first, he needed to document the last families, to bring his life's work to completion. Family 39 was photographed in June 2019, a large group of 7, including 3 juveniles of different ages. Daniel watched them disappear with the same grief he'd felt 38 times before. Family 40 in September 2019, just a pair, possibly newly bonded, gone within a week. Family 41 in January 2020, just before the world shut down for COVID. An older family with what appeared to be grandparents and their adult offspring. The last time Daniel hiked to their territory, in late January, he found only silence. Family 42 in August 2020. Daniel was getting sicker by this point, the cancer spreading, but he pushed himself. This family had juveniles, and watching them play reminded him why he'd started this project. These beings deserved to be known, to be protected, to be recognized as the people they clearly were. Family 43 in March 2021. Daniel could barely make the hike anymore. The pain was constant, even with the medications he'd finally conceded to take. But he had to document one more family, one more set of photographs to add to his archive. This last family was special. They seemed to sense his presence in a way others hadn't. On his third day of observation, the largest adult, a massive male with gray-streaked brown hair, approached his blind. Not aggressively, but deliberately. The creature stopped 15 feet away and looked directly at Daniel. Not at the blind, but at Daniel specifically, as if it could see through the camouflage. Their eyes met, and Daniel saw something in that gaze that took his breath away. Understanding, sadness, even forgiveness. The creature raised one hand, not threateningly, but in what looked like a gesture of acknowledgement, a goodbye. Then it turned and walked away, leading its family deeper into the forest. Daniel photographed them as they left, his hands shaking, tears running down his face. These were the last photographs he would ever take. It was now May 2023, and Daniel Mercer was dying. The cancer had spread everywhere: liver, lungs, bones. He was essentially bedridden, able to move around his cabin only with great difficulty. He'd hired a hospice nurse, a kind woman named Patricia, who came 3 times a week to help with basic care and pain management. Patricia thought he was just an old photographer who'd lived alone in the woods. She'd seen his landscape photographs displayed around the cabin, the ones he'd taken of mountains and rivers and forests, the acceptable work that didn't reveal his secret. She had no idea about the storage facilities, the thousands of photographs hidden across 3 states, the documentation of 43 families and 34 years of a pattern that proved something extraordinary and terrible. Daniel had maybe weeks left, maybe days, and he needed to decide what to do with his life's work. He'd resisted going public for so long because he couldn't bear the thought of putting more families at risk, but he was dying anyway. The dead man's switch he'd created would trigger eventually, and he'd started to wonder, what if keeping this secret was actually more dangerous than revealing it? What if the people capturing these families were doing it precisely because nobody knew Bigfoot existed? What if public knowledge would actually provide protection, make it harder for shadowy government agencies or whoever was doing this to operate in darkness? Or what if he was delusional? What if revealing the photographs would trigger a hunting frenzy, put every remaining Bigfoot at risk, cause the extinction of a species? The moral calculus was impossible. There was no right answer. In late May 2023, Daniel made a decision. He would tell his story to one person, a journalist he'd researched carefully, someone known for investigating government conspiracies and cover-ups, someone with a track record of protecting sources. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she worked for a major investigative news organization. Daniel wrote her a letter, carefully worded, explaining nothing but asking if she'd be interested in the story of someone who'd photographed Bigfoot for 34 years. He included one photograph, not of a Bigfoot, but of his cabin and the forest, establishing his credentials as a wildlife photographer. He gave her his phone number and waited. Sarah called within 2 days. "Mr. Mercer, I got your letter. I have to say, I'm skeptical. I've heard a lot of Bigfoot stories over the years, and they're usually—" "I have 1,147 photographs," Daniel interrupted. "High-resolution images of 43 different family groups across 7 states. I have documentation of their social structures, communication methods, and behaviors. I have evidence of a systematic pattern of disappearances following documentation, and I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer, which means I have nothing to lose by finally telling the truth." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Can you prove any of this?" Sarah finally asked. "I can show you everything, but you need to come here to my cabin. I can't travel anymore, and Ms. Chen, if you come, you need to understand that you might be putting yourself at risk. The people who've been monitoring this, who've been capturing these families, they don't want this information public." "How do I know you're not just another hoaxer looking for attention?" "Because I'm dying and I'm not asking for fame. I'm asking for someone to witness my confession." someone to decide what should be done with evidence I've been too afraid to share. Come or don't come. But if you do, come prepared to see something that will change everything you think you know about the world. Sarah arrived 3 days later, driving up the rough logging road to Daniel's cabin with clear apprehension. Daniel watched from his window as she parked and approached slowly, carrying recording equipment and a camera. When he opened the door, she was clearly shocked by his appearance. Daniel had lost over 60 pounds since his diagnosis. His skin had taken on a yellowish tint. He moved with obvious pain. "Mr. Mercer." "Call me Daniel, come in. We don't have much time. I mean that both literally and practically. If people are monitoring this place, they'll know you're here." Over the next 6 hours, Daniel told Sarah everything. The first encounter in 1989, the pattern of disappearances, the 43 families he'd documented, the evidence of government involvement, the guilt he'd carried for 3 decades. Sarah recorded it all, asking questions, taking notes, clearly struggling to process what she was hearing. "I need to see the photographs," she finally said. Daniel shook his head. "Not yet. First, you need to understand what publishing them might cause. These beings, they're not animals, Sarah. They're people. Intelligent, emotional, social people who happen to be different from us. If the world learns they exist, what happens to them? Protection, maybe? If people know they're real, wouldn't there be pressure to protect their habitats too? Or there'd be hunting parties, capture efforts, people trying to prove they exist by killing one. Religious fundamentalists claiming they're demons. Scientists wanting to study them in laboratories. Tourism destroying what little territory they have left." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "So what do you want? Why tell me at all if you don't want the story published?" "Because I don't know what the right choice is," Daniel admitted. "I've spent 34 years trying to figure it out, and I'm dying without an answer. Maybe you can find one. Maybe someone younger, someone who'll live to see the consequences, can make a better choice than I did." "Show me the photographs," Sarah said quietly. "Let me see what you've seen. Then we can decide together." Daniel nodded slowly. From a locked safe in his darkroom, he retrieved a single storage box. Inside were prints from his first family, the River family from 1989, the juvenile holding the adult's hand, the family drinking from the creek, the moment of tenderness that had started everything. Sarah looked at the photographs for a long time. Daniel watched her face move through the predictable stages: skepticism, disbelief, careful examination, and finally, wonder. "Oh my God," she whispered, "these are real. Every one of them. Daniel, this is the most important wildlife discovery in modern history. These photographs need to be shared with the scientific community, with..." "Every family I photographed disappeared within a week," Daniel interrupted. "Show me how I share these images without condemning every remaining Bigfoot to capture or death, and I'll give you access to all 47 photographs right now." Sarah set down the photographs carefully. "You really think publication would put them at risk?" "I know it would. The question is whether the risk is worth it, whether public knowledge would ultimately provide more protection than secrecy." "I can't answer that question. I'm too close to it, too compromised by guilt. But you're an investigative journalist. This is what you do. Weigh the public interest against potential harm. So I'm asking you to make the choice I couldn't make." Sarah Chen stayed at a motel in Trout Lake for the next week, visiting Daniel's cabin each day. She examined more photographs. She reviewed his documentation of the disappearance patterns. She made calls to sources in various government agencies, carefully probing without revealing what she was investigating. What she discovered both confirmed and complicated Daniel's fears. There was indeed government knowledge of Bigfoot, classified programs dating back to the 1960s, occasional references in declassified documents about non-human primates in North American forests. But there was no clear evidence of a systematic capture program. The government seemed more interested in maintaining deniability than active suppression, which raised a more disturbing question. If not the government, who was capturing these families? Sarah's investigation uncovered rumors of private entities, wealthy collectors who paid bounties for exotic animals, black market operations trafficking in endangered species, even biotech companies interested in studying unique genetic material. The Bigfoot, rare and unprotected by any law, would be extraordinarily valuable to such operations. Daniel's photographs hadn't been alerting the government. They'd been alerting the hunters. There are people who monitor for evidence, Sarah explained to Daniel during one of their final conversations. Not government agents, private contractors, information brokers. When someone starts showing the signs of researching or documenting Bigfoot seriously, they get flagged. Your equipment purchases, your location, your patterns, you lit up like a beacon for anyone paying attention. So I led them directly to 43 families, Daniel said, his voice hollow. You didn't know. You couldn't have known. I knew after the third family. I knew after the fifth. I kept doing it anyway. I kept photographing them, kept marking them, because I couldn't stop myself. That's not ignorance, Sarah. That's selfishness. They sat in silence for a long moment. What do you want me to do with this story? Sarah finally asked. Daniel looked out at the forest through his cabin window. 34 years in this place. 34 years of watching beings that the world refused to acknowledge. 34 years of guilt. Tell the truth, he said. All of it. The photographs, the disappearances, the pattern. Let people know these beings exist, but also let them know what happened every time I documented them. Let the hunters know we're watching now. Let the world know that Bigfoot aren't animals to be captured. They're people to be protected. And if publication causes more harm, if it triggers a rush to find them, to hunt them, then I'll die knowing I failed them one last time, Daniel said quietly. But at least I'll die having tried. At least someone will know the truth. That has to count for something. Sarah Chen's article was published 3 weeks later, on June 18, 2023, exactly 34 years after Daniel took his first photographs of the River family. The article included select photographs, released strategically, enough to prove authenticity, not enough to reveal specific locations. It detailed Daniel's decades of research, the pattern of disappearances, the evidence of systematic hunting operations. It called for federal protection of Bigfoot under the Endangered Species Act and for criminal investigations into the parties responsible for capturing these beings. The response was explosive. Scientists demanded access to the full photographic archive. Cryptozoologists declared vindication. Skeptics claimed elaborate hoax despite extensive verification. The story dominated news cycles for weeks. Federal agencies launched investigations into the disappearances. Several private companies with exotic animal trafficking connections found themselves under scrutiny. Legislation was proposed to classify Bigfoot as an endangered species with severe penalties for harm or harassment. Whether any of this would actually protect the remaining families, Sarah didn't know. But at least now the world was watching. At least now the hunters couldn't operate entirely in darkness. Daniel Mercer died on July 3, 2023, 15 days after the article's publication. Patricia, his hospice nurse, found him in his bed, a slight smile on his face, a single photograph clutched in his hand. The juvenile holding the adult's hand in the sunlit meadow. His will stipulated that all his photographs and documentation should be donated to a conservation organization dedicated to protecting large primate habitats. The organization, after much debate, made a controversial decision. They would preserve the archive but never reveal the specific locations where the photographs were taken. The evidence of existence would be public. The remaining families would stay hidden. In the summer of 2024, 1 year after Daniel's death and the publication of Sarah Chen's article, something extraordinary happened. A wildlife camera in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, not one of Daniel's old cameras, but a new one placed by a conservation group, captured footage of a Bigfoot family. The video showed 4 individuals, 2 adults and 2 juveniles. The remarkable thing wasn't that they'd been captured on camera. The remarkable thing was what happened next. The largest adult approached the camera directly. It looked into the lens for a long moment. Then it raised one hand, not threateningly, but in what looked unmistakably like a gesture of acknowledgement, a goodbye, or perhaps a hello. Then it carefully, deliberately turned the camera to face a tree, obscuring the lens. The message was clear. They knew about the cameras now. They knew they were being watched, and they were setting their own boundaries about what could and couldn't be seen. The Bigfoot were no longer simply hiding. They were communicating their desire for privacy. They were asserting their right to exist without documentation. The conservation organization, after much discussion, respected this boundary. They removed the cameras from that area. No more attempts to photograph or document, just protection of the habitat and quiet monitoring to prevent human intrusion. It wasn't perfect. Hunters and thrill seekers still ventured into the forests, hoping to prove Bigfoot existed or to capture one. But they were met with federal rangers, hefty fines, and in some cases, arrest. The Bigfoot remained elusive. Sightings continued, but clear documentation became rarer. The beings had learned, adapting to the new reality where humanity knew they existed, but, thanks to Daniel's warning, understood the danger that documentation brought. Sarah Chen wrote a follow-up article 1 year after Daniel's death. In it, she reflected on the impossible choice Daniel had faced: document and condemn, or stay silent and let them disappear into myth. Daniel Mercer spent 34 years trying to prove these beings existed, she wrote, and another 34 years learning that maybe some things should remain unproven. His photographs are evidence of both Bigfoot's reality and humanity's capacity for unintended harm. His legacy asks us a question we still haven't answered. Is it possible to acknowledge wonder without destroying it? The River family, the first family Daniel ever photographed in 1989, was never seen again. Neither were the other 42 families he documented, whether they were still alive somewhere, relocated to territories deep enough that humans would never find them. Daniel never knew. But on certain summer mornings in the Pacific Northwest, hikers sometimes report finding gifts left along trails. Perfect spirals of pine cones, arrangements of river stones, fish left carefully on flat rocks. No footprints nearby, no obvious source. The Bigfoot, it seemed, had learned something from their decades of observation. They'd learned that not all humans were threats, that some, like Daniel Mercer, carried guilt and love and impossible choices. And in their own way, in their own time, they were saying thank you. Or perhaps simply, we remember you too.